And the more precautions you take,
A very good evening and a warm welcome to all our viewers. I'm Shivangi Srivastav, Head of Digital Marketing at Docplexus. It gives me immense pleasure to share that we are in the fourth week of our 4-week-long anniversary celebration of completing 8 glorious years. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank each and everyone on behalf of my fellow Docplexians for your constant support and love over the past years. This session, like many others, was developed to help you, our SCB, understand the 4 broad areas to make your practice better and increase the touch points with your patients based on avenues like medical legal, brand development, finance, and online social presence. Today's session is on managing patients' reviews the right way. Okay, so before we begin, let me walk you through what you'll learn today. This session will empower you with the proven 5-step strategies that can double or even triple the patient reviews in less than 12 months. I, along with my fellow Docplexian Priyanka Kumari, will be taking you through some of the very interesting insights and help you manage these touch points from a patient's perspective. I would request you to sincerely stay with us till the end of the session to unlock some of these amazing resources. And we also have a small Q&A plan at the end of the session. Please feel free to ask us many questions. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to use the chat box and we'll do our best to take them on during our Q&A session. Diving right in. Why are patient reviews important? Now, to answer that, we need to really understand the patient journey and what leads them to seek clinical service from you. Take, for example, a new patient. A new patient is typically looking up for a doctor based on their requirements and scans through the specialties as per his or her preferred criteria, or maybe the doctor he comes to know through word of mouth. Whereas an existing patient who has visited you or has undergone prescription tries to cross-check on the treatment suggested by you. A good online reputation is important for more than just visibility. Your practice will encounter good, bad, and unpleasant reviews, and if your practice has 2 or 3 recent bad reviews, you can lose up to 67% of potential patients who read that negative review. Now, that's a lot. And you know what they say, patients see you long before you see them. Now, one of our recent studies also suggested that the negative word of mouth of an unhappy patient spreads to an average of 9 people. And on the other hand, a happy patient discusses his experience with an average of only 4 people. Now, we might rate, our job satisfaction by our professional knowledge or attending CMEs or mastering new skills or simply keeping pace with new technologies. However, all these factors are completely irrelevant to the patient. Ultimately, whether a patient is happy with the doctor's approach depends on different non-clinical factors like listening to him or her, promptness of service, how they are spoken to, and basically how the gesture of your staff is towards your patient. So let's understand this in detail by referring to certain specialties. Take example of pediatrician, right? Newly turned patients are always in constant search of a pediatrician whom they can trust their infant with and have a long-term association. Whereas IVF consultants, where clinical IVF consultants, they do not require as many follow-ups as other specialties, and in fact are at a higher risk of getting lesser number of new patients with just one negative review. Whereas the specialties where regular follow-ups are required, the chances of losing existing patients are much higher. Now, what goes really into a final decision of a patient choosing a doctor? All of them are listed below. They're sort of quite explanatory, but we'll just quickly go through them one by one. So when I say quality of care, it's not just about your clinical experience, but also the ease of access to interact with you, your responses, or you basically involving them in the process of decision making. Second one is cost. Now it's no hidden matter that one needs to know the current market trend, because no matter how good your clinical expertise is, no matter how good your staff treats the patient, the financial aspect always forms one of the most important criteria for the patients to seek healthcare. Another very important aspect is wait time. Certain indicators should anyway be maintained, like time taken from the patient's registry to being initially assessed, to the diagnostic investigation, to the primary diagnosis, and finally the treatment. Experience with staff being courteous, empathetic, and mindful of patient time is also another important factor that adds to the positivity or the positive impact on the patient. And the others being ease of booking appointments and accuracy of diagnosis. Now that you know all the reasons why you should ask your patient for online reviews, I will now be addressing how can you get started and manage your online presence. So the next topic that we'll be addressing is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to perceiving how to read these reviews. It is the age-old conundrum, which is reviews versus ratings. So is it better to have more reviews, or is it better to have better ratings? I mean, there's a balance. Let's find out. So let's consider these two reviews. Which review do you think would make a stronger impact in the eyes of the patient? Review 1, where a service or a practice has received over 425 reviews, but averages out at a rating of 3.6. On the other hand, there's a practice which has 5.0 rating, but only 3 reviews. Well, a recent study found out that patients choose to go with practices that have more reviews, even when the alternatives have higher average scores. This tells us a very important fact about reviews. Online reviews have their good points and their bad points based upon the type of feedback given. So let's take an example. Someone who leaves a 1-star rating for a hospital with the comment, "This place should go out of business or be simply burned to the ground." It's not really giving me any feedback that would be actually useful to me as a patient. But a 1-star rating that talks in specifics like wait times, appointment issues, or horrible staff attitudes will definitely give the patients a pause and make them read more reviews from others. Now, these results show that patients are looking at reviews with a critical eye, and they would automatically believe everything they read. Now, this is great news for providers who have dealt with those exaggerated or fake reviews before, especially since many review sites don't require any verification before these reviews can be posted. Now, this brings to our next very important question. What qualifies as a mental minimum for an average patient? It's hard to really tell which one is more important, volume, valence, or quality. But if you're wondering if there's a perfect rating or number of online reviews that you should strive for, then the answer is it absolutely exists. The possibility of a potential patient considering your practice or service will peak if you have star rating from either 4.0 to 4.7 and may consequently decrease in the 4.7 to 5.0 range. Now, most online searchers consider these highest ratings like too good to be true. In addition, when potential patients interact with lesser rated reviews, they tend to spend more time reading about your services or practice. Now, this gives them more time to get to know you. And as a result, those potential patients are more likely to convert. So, in fact, as a matter of fact, the likelihood of a patient coming to you is 270% greater if you have a minimum of 5 reviews than him or her considering a practice with no online reviews. Quality-wise, I would say the rating between 5 to 10 works as a brilliant mental minimum for a patient. But without a perfect rating, your potential patients probably won't even bother going through all the reviews. And if they do, they expect to find helpful information that comes directly from your past patients. Here are 3 aspects that play a pivotal role. One is authenticity, which is basically the story should come from real people. The review should not feel like they have just been, made up by your own practice, which are too good to be true. Second is helpfulness. There should be enough user information in there. As I mentioned before, there should be details about the wait time, your cost, your treatment time, and so on. And the last one is obviously honesty and unbiasedness, which sort of relates to the first point of authenticity, that there should be no incentive behind the person creating a review for you. Now, what does an ideal review look like? And by an ideal review, I mean what review actually convinces a patient to consider your practice. Now, I would request from here Priyanka to take on and continue with the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Shivangi, for beautifully capturing on how the patient reviews and the ratings goes. Now, coming on to the next section, we are going to talk about how do HCPs ask for reviews, how the medical practitioners basically ask for patient reviews, and why do they struggle so much when they can actually ask for one. So the first question which we hear about is how commonly they feel very uncomfortable in asking for reviews. So asking for how their clinical practice was, how the experience was overall for the patients. More often than not, it feels too much pressure and it becomes really awkward for the clinicians when they ask their patients on basically reviewing their practice because they're afraid somewhere that it will strain the patient-doctor relationship. Now, the perception, I would say, is misplaced in these cases. The second most common struggle that we have normally seen comes from the medical practitioners when should they ask for reviews. So when they ask for reviews, they don't get many. So if you're asking a person to provide their honest review, how they like their practice, what would happen is they would refrain from giving a review, fearing the anonymity as well as the condition they are going through. Now, this usually means that they aren't asking the right way. It might also be the case that it's not the right time or with the right tools. Although there is no such thing where one size or one solution would fit every patient, but then we are trying to discuss on key strategies on how you can effectively set an autopilot system to ask for review without being too pushy. So now let's move ahead and see how do we actually time a request and ask our patients effectively so that they are ready to share their reviews. Now, the first area is when they step out of your clinic. They obviously sit around, wait for a minute while they gather their belongings, and then they eventually step out of your clinic. Now, this time can be a crucial moment when you can ask them for a review. What happens is that you can ask in a thoughtful and meaningful way when you want your review to be better timed for different ways. Like you can send out an email, or better, you can keep a tablet at your premise or reception desk where you can ask them to write a review then and there itself. For example, a hospital doesn't want to ask people for reviews while they are undergoing a difficult treatment or any cosmetic surgery, or they just do not want to ask people to review them while they're still recovering from their surgery. So we have to pick up a sensible time when we are following up with them so we can understand that they're in a safe zone. They're in a zone where they can think beyond the treatment and they're willing to really provide a review for you. So timing a review is definitely important, but providing them reminders as well is very pertinent to how well you are getting a review from your patient. So you have to provide them reminders as well by giving them a follow-up call. Usually what happens is that when a patient comes to you after the treatment, they need to specify certain things about how they're doing, how they are feeling, how the treatment has really panned out for them, how they have fared after the treatment is complete or after your diagnosis. So these visits then really become crucial when you can ask your patient for a review whether they're feeling better or not, if they're happy with your service or not, if they're happy with your staff or not. So if they're really, really happy with your practice, they will definitely give you a positive or some sort of moderate review online. So this is really important for you to consider while asking reviews from your patients. First of all, timing, and then how to follow up and when to follow up with them. What we can also do is we can provide them a handout whenever they are sitting, in the clinic, which can be a form of a card or a piece of paper, which can be attached to their receipt, or this could even be a sticker that says, please review us online. So all these small gestures and efforts will actually gather a lot of insights on your current practice and will amass you a repository of more and more reviews going forward. So now moving ahead, we have seen how and when to time your reviews, how to to follow up, we also need to understand how to engage with our patients very effectively. So the first thing that comes into the picture is, who is your loyal patient? We have to identify who our loyal patients are, who keep coming to us again and again with their ailments, and how we take care of them and encourage them to share whatever they are feeling, however they have been through the entire process, right from the appointment status to completing the treatment. And what eventually happens is, when you take care of them, they take care of you. So how do they really do it? They can give a small review on your Google Maps or any other platform like Tracto that you are on. So they will share a small review on your practice or on their overall experience with your interaction or your consultation or your staff behavior or your clinic environment. So they can share a small review on all that, how friendly you were with them, how well you treated them. So that is where you really need to then effectively engage with your patients. Now, you may be surprised to know, but often it's up to you actually as to how you identify your loyal patients. And more often than not, the best way to ask them is to ask them in person. So you can explain the entire process of how you would be approaching them for a review. It could be through an email, it could be through an SMS, it could be through a WhatsApp. So you explain the process while you are interacting with the patient, and then record all the details that you would need for having such follow-up. And then also tell them that you would be sending a follow-up email to remind that, uh, just in case they have not shared the review with you. So it will be really great of you if you can come up to me and help me out increasing my practice. That should be the tone of how you would be talking to them. But do definitely explain the entire process while you're already interacting with such patients. So now there are various ways to send out reminders, which is possible by an email or like I earlier said, by an SMS or a WhatsApp, whatever works best for you. But you can start whatever communication format you want to sort of follow by thanking them, because you want to tell them that thank you for thinking about my practice. Then you can ask if they can review you on any review site, mention the review site, or any hospital site, mention the hospital site that you are attached to. You can ask them because their opinion really matters in your practice. How did we do? We would love to hear your feedback and such motivating things. So keep them in center and then ask how you really did. Sending them a personalized email after an examination is the easiest way to ask for an online review without actually asking. You can also send up a follow up email thanking the patient for coming in and asking if everything went well. Now, all this is fine, but how do you keep track of always, sending up emails to request such reviews? Automating these requests is also a way to collect review for clinicians, and this is a strategy which you can adopt if you want to generate a large number of reviews and then take cognizance of what feedback you're getting and thus improve your practice as well. So after a point, you can simply send an email asking for review. Again, the timing will make all the difference. If you send it right away, then the person will definitely lose interest, because it takes time for the person to go out of your clinic, reach home, sit, relax, discuss what happened in the clinic, and then see the email. So timing your email for review could be around 4 hours after the appointment. It also affects their mindset in giving a positive versus a negative review. So it's absolutely important to establish rules. For example, if you're a plastic surgeon performing a tummy tuck, you do not send out the request after a few days of surgery, but rather after a follow-up treatment. Because after you have followed up with the patient, you would know if the patient has any follow-up ailments or they are facing any side effects. So that is the best way to understand if the person is actually feeling comfortable about the entire treatment or not. The best way to automate any review collection via email is through various customer relationship management systems. You can create a workflow or user journeys where you can send email requests to patients individually and in a personalized manner, where they meet your conditions that you had outlined, in earlier only. So that is how you can manage the automation part as well. If you are a surgeon, then the ideal wait time for any surgery cases would be 2 days, because normally after 2 days of any surgical operation or surgical procedure, there's a follow-up consultation where you get to sort of re-examine the patient on how he or she has taken up the entire surgical procedure. And then you would understand how they're faring, and then you can ask for a review. But keep in mind that it is very, very, very necessary to take care of your loyal patients and ask at the right time in a right way. So we covered how you should be asking questions, when should you be asking the questions, and how should you be doing the follow-up emails as reminders. Now, asking the right way will make a lot of difference to what type of review you will get, because carefully worded requests matter a lot. It is really important to lay some ground rules and make it easy for your patients to review your practice. You have to remind your patient is that they don't really need to elaborate the details about their visit. Provide them examples of general statements like the doctor is very caring, the doctor is very friendly, the doctor noted down all that I had to tell about my ailment, the doctor took care of all nuances of what should be looked upon, and spend good time with them so that they can answer all your questions well. So you also need to give an option to patients so that they can submit their reviews anonymously, because that's the biggest fear in the mind of the patient. Or you can inform them that even if they have mentioned their name, you will remove their names. If you're responding to either thank them or refute a negative review, do not disclose any of their personal information because it disputes the patient doctor confidentiality. You should make sure that no details are there on their names, on their visits, phone number, email IDs. You should never mention all these things. Please make sure to inform your patient on what is the objective of the review, where, on which all platforms it will be shared. Be as transparent as you can. It shouldn't be the case that you only showcase the positive reviews and hide negative reviews. In fact, you would have noticed this in various sites where you would see a lot of positive reviews, but hardly any negative reviews. And then you question the site itself if it's all framed up or cooked up reviews that you are seeing. Because it's better to show both, because that's more practical, that's more real. And you also acknowledge the fact that there is room for it and their feedback is well appreciated. So do you mention both type of reviews. Now there are 6 steps to how you can really ask your patient about a review. So it starts with requesting for a favor. Then you reassure them that it will only take a couple of minutes for them to share their review. Then you have to remind them on how it will help your practice and eventually help them. Then you also need to run them through the entire process of form filling and what is the mode of getting the review from them. Then you make sure that you record all their primary email addresses and also mention that it won't be used for any other purposes. And finally, you reach out to them and let them know on how you really appreciate their reviews. So that is, the understanding of how, why, and when to take the reviews from the patients. Moving ahead, so after discussing everything in theory conceptually, it's time to move ahead and look into the actual application or case-based discussions that we have in store for you. Now we have understood how to receive the reviews, when to receive the reviews, how to ask your patient so that they can share the reviews. What happens when you really receive the reviews? What's the next step that you should be doing? The next step, ideally, is how to deal with them, especially the negative reviews. This is a challenge for everyone, not just the medical practitioners, not just you, but any content creator who posts anything or any service provider faces this pertinent question on dealing with the negative reviews. It's but natural to have good, bad, and unpleasant reviews, even if you and your staff have put your heart and soul to create a wonderful experience for patients. So, to understand how to really address the negative reviews, first look at the redressal system. Now, here enlisted are the basic pointers in addressing any type of review, whether it is a positive review or a negative review, more so on negative reviews, but it's valid for every type of review that you get. The first step is to acknowledge that you have got a review. If it's a negative review, acknowledge and apologize, even when you know that the review or comment is not true entirely. You know what happens is that the patient sometimes exaggerate or is in a negative mindset because of his or her own environment, or it could be a perception, or it could be an expectation mismatch in the case of this patient. So you should be cognizant that it may not be entirely the truth, but acknowledging and apologizing is the first step that you should definitely have in mind. Now, when it comes to apologies, it's a little tricky. It's okay to display empathy to all the patients, be understanding that, okay, I hear you, I understand what you have to tell about my practice or the experience that you got in my clinic, but don't be too apologetic. When you know that this review is misplaced, has not the correct intention of sharing a valid feedback with you. So empathize, but do it very smartly. It's the next step, which is very important after you have acknowledged, you have apologized, you have empathized with the patient, is to highlight your high level commitment to delivering a perfect experience or a wonderful experience each and every time. So tell them that you would like to apologize for the experience that they got, but you are always focused on giving a wonderful and delightful experience to all the patients that come in, and you appreciate their feedback. They have taken out time from their busy schedule to share this review. So if they want to discuss more, we can connect through a mobile number or through a WhatsApp conversation or through an email. So take it offline, address the problem, personalize it, really touch base with them, but do it offline. Move all your online review redressal system to an offline channel. That's the best way to really tackle it. So having those basic pointers in place now, let's look at some of the cases so that we understand whatever I meant through acknowledging, apologizing, empathizing, and addressing in offline space. So let's look at the real world application. So this is the first case. This is a case discussion wherein the patient is responding to a plastic surgeon. Now the patient is saying that I'm truly baffled by all the stellar reviews on the page. I wonder if the doctor paid for them. I'm very unhappy with the results of my rhinoplasty. So what the patient has really done is that not only sort of shared his or her own negative experience, but also questioned the entire review, taking mechanism. So how to really address this? You can write, as it has been written here. It is always difficult to hear that a patient had a bad experience at my office. So you address the majority of the patient experience first, because the patient has questioned that. So you can mention that while my focus is that all the patients feel happy, we are human and we can make mistakes. We are not perfect. So we take full responsibility. So you have acknowledged and you have apologized. Now, then you don't over apologize. You say it is unfair to say that our reviews are not genuine. The positive reviews here reflect the quality work that me and my staff are doing for the patients. And then you move it to an offline space and you say, I would welcome you to come see me and explore the best options for your ailment. So you have done all the three things through this beautifully constructed worded paragraph. Next, let's move on to the next case. Now, this is a patient versus a dermatologist case where the patient is saying, after you get past the fancy white spaceship interior, you realize that the service is super overpriced. This guy charges way more than anyone else. Now, this is again very tricky because they have sort of made fun of your interior, though they are saying that it's good, but they are saying that it's of no use, it's not value for money, it's too premium for the experience that they get eventually. So how would you do it in a very candid manner? So this is not a formal very strictly worded response. You do in a very candid manner. You say that while it would be cool to operate in a spaceship, we are just your regular dermatologist office. So what you want to do is that you take away the focus from the interior or your office design to your service, to your clinical practice. So you talk about how your team always, is trying to find great solutions, and sometimes the best treatment is not the cheapest. So you tell them that it's always not, money vis-a-vis the service that they're getting or the treatment they are getting. It could be cheap, it could be premium also. But what they believe at the end of the day is exceptional service. So, and that's how you sort of reinforce whatever you stand for. Moving ahead, let's look at another case, which is patient versus family medicine specialist. This is a humble response. Now, the tone of the responses you would notice will change, keep on changing, because as I said, one size doesn't fit all. This patient is saying that the doctor is constantly disrespectful of my time. I had a noon appointment and walked out at 12:45 without getting seen. Now, this is something that any patient would be facing in any sort of setup. It could be a small clinical setup or a big hospital setup. And once this timing thing comes, they become very sentimental because everybody has a schedule mapped up. So they can share these reviews. So first of all, you should apologize because definitely in their busy schedule, they had their entire day planned accordingly. So you apologize for the wait time on your last visit. And then you also tell them that what was the problem. So involve them on the back end story. That there was a scheduling error, there was a miscommunication on our part, and it was completely unacceptable. So you're going, a mile ahead and telling them that it was an error from their side because of the scheduling error. And then you tell them that we have taken steps to avoid this in future. You mean a lot to us, and we want to maintain a long-term relationship. And please do visit us again because we have fixed whatever there was, whatever glitch there was in our scheduling pattern. So that's a humble response of actually accepting your mistake. Moving on to the next case discussion, wherein the patient is talking about a dentist. The patient says, "This place is a scam. Look at how difficult or hard the patient is really being, or cruel the patient is really being with the doctors. These guys told me I had a bunch of cavities, but I went to another practice and told me I had no cavities and I was a low risk patient." So they are comparing two doctors now. Again, a very common practice. So how would you reply to that? So you acknowledge, first of all, you appreciate that they have taken out time to review their practice or review your practice. Then you would like to address the issue. So you tell them that different dentists have different philosophies and you cannot really, compare practices or philosophies. So you talk about how you have, sort of diagnosed the problem and how the other dentist would have diagnosed the problem. You don't need to really go into the details, but just, sort of mention that your way of treatment could be very different than a treatment regimen followed by any other dentist. And then you say that you are glad that the patient has found a dentist they feel really comfortable with. And that's the only thing that as a doctor you want for them. And that's it, move ahead. So there's no point in apologizing for your own treatment methodology. That's all fine. So we move on to the next case discussion. Here, the patient is talking about an ophthalmologist. This is a very professional reply that you would be seeing here. So the patient is saying, this doctor really messed up my eyes. Run. Don't walk away from him. Just run. So again, a very funny way of putting a negative review. But then this is how the doctor has responded. Hey there, I'm genuinely sorry to hear that you're not seeing as well as you should. So there's an expectation mismatch here, and the doctor has accepted that, acknowledged that. What he has or she has, done after that is that they are asking the patient to come back to them so that the doctor can help improve their outcome. Because again, you show your highest commitment to service delivery. I'm committed to helping all my patients, and I encourage you to set up an appointment. So you're taking the online review to an offline space by asking them to come back to you so that you can resolve their problem better. So this is how you really deal with the entire negative review. So after seeing through all the different type of cases that you could see while you are getting reviews or getting negative reviews, and how you really change your tone with each and every review. It could be humble, it could be candid, it could be professional, it could be direct, it could be honest. So now we need to assess where we actually stand with the reviews. So 6 pointers for that. First pointer, what platforms are you being reviewed at online? How many reviews do you have? What shows up on the first page of a Google search for your practice? After you have understood how you have got the review, how you have understood the feedback, then you go to the negative side of it. Do you have any negative reviews? What is your average star rating online? Because positive plus negative makes an average star rating online. And then you create a benchmark for yourself and see where you want to go ahead from that benchmark. And then you also try and gather how recent are your reviews. This is how you assess where you really stand in the plan that you have made for yourself in getting patient reviews. I hope this was an insightful session for you, where you understood how the patient reviews are taken, how the patient reviews help your practice, why you should not be hesitating while taking the patient reviews. If you want to take the patient reviews, when to do it, how to do it, what format to select to get the reviews, what are the 6 steps in asking your patients the right way to send a review for you, then how to deal with the negative reviews, and finally, keep on assessing and monitoring where you really stand in terms of patient review. I would like to again extend my gratitude to Shivangi and our backend team, the media and graphics team, for having this insightful, wonderful webinar session for all our audience. It was a great conversation that we had today. We are getting a lot of questions right now, guys. So what I will do is I would like to invite my co-host, Ms. Shivangi Srivastav, to join me in addressing some of the questions that we have got for the session. So, Shivangi, the first question that we have got from our dear audience is asking for the opinion or review right after consultation feels cheap. So how can this problem be reduced or addressed? Your views?
So I think this is a challenge for a lot of the doctors. I'm sure, I mean, everybody faces some difficulty, or I would say rather awkwardness, to ask for reviews upfront. So a simple suggestion, or I would say a strategy, would be to handle this with the help of your staff. So after your consultation is done, and while the patient is checking out of the clinic, or settling the bill, a small and a candid conversation from your staff to the patient about in general how their experience was, how was the appointment booking process, was the wait time okay, was it too much, was it something you expected. So a small, I think, and a candid conversation around this would really go miles. And if there's a positive review, having a user touch point or a patient touch point in the form of, let's say, a QR code established right at the reception, where the users could just scan and land onto the website or whichever platform and put in their reviews, would be really helpful. Now, in case if it's a negative review, or in case something negative comes out of the conversation between your staff and the patient, and if it's a genuine review, then ideally I think effort should be made to make sure that these corrections are made in your practice, and a small follow-up discussion in the form of either an email or a phone call or an SMS, simply suggesting and simply mentioning that you promise that the consultation experience next time is going to be better, and standing true to those words would really help. So I suppose that answers the question.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for covering both the positive and negative review, and how the staff should be brought in at the right time to really take feedback from the patients. The next question that I'm getting, and that's across the board, many clinicians are asking that. Sometimes a remark or review is not a true reflection of your practice. So how should HCPs be dealing with this?
Sure. So I think, Priyanka, whoever's asked this question is honestly quite on point, because the remarks could be good and bad. When we are talking about specifically a negative review, I think the first step to do is simply acknowledge it. You don't have to ignore it. You don't have to, start defending it or really, get angry by it. The simple first step is acknowledging and accepting. And again, as I said in my previous answer, a small follow-up discussion or a call would really help. So before, after seeing a review, before you really hyperventilate or really shoot off an angry reply, do one thing: take a nice deep breath, calm yourself down, and then depending on how wary you want to be as a practice, you can respond in two ways. If you feel that a review is like genuinely defamatory or disparaging, or if it's very insulting and personally attacks you or your staff, you can request the platform on which the published review is there, and request them for it to be removed, obviously by giving reasons to it. The other one, which I would potentially advocate for more, is simply the contact as approach. I think all you need to do is just respond with your contact details, assure the patients that you have heard or you have seen their grievances, and you will take every step possible to address their concern. If by chance you're able, luckily, you're able to get a positive response after that on the same review, try to take out the patient offline, try to talk to them offline, and see if the satisfying results can be achieved. Once done, you can ask them to simply edit their review. But as I said, if it's something, if you feel that the review is not something which reflects your, your practice in a true light, and I'm not saying a good light, but in a true light, then, if you've tried and spoken to the patient and the patient is, he's just generally being irrational, or is not saying things which are not, or saying things which are not true, then ideally you should take the other, discourse where you ask or you speak to the platform and request them to get it removed by showing, of course, the proof of, you trying to establish contact with that patient, or you trying to make peace or make amends, and that the other party is still like not heeding to it or just angry for no reasons. Then I think you can go ahead and request the platform to be for it to be removed. But as much as possible, I would suggest, as I think Priyanka, you also mentioned during your part of the session, that it's best to take things offline, talk to the person. Maybe there are some points actually which you might need to improve in your practice for better results. So always, always, always hear out what the patient has to speak. Basis that, take a corrective measure.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that, Shivangi. Acknowledging, apologizing, but still, standing to what you truly, mean for the patient is the right way to really deal with it. A follow-up question that I'm getting on that is that how to really deal with fake reviews, because more often than not, they would be, sort of not happy with one thing, but they would blow it out of proportion, exaggerate, and then share fake reviews. So how did you deal with that?
And I think especially even when we were discussing the various examples of how people sometimes go off on negative reviews,
So usually when it comes to, I wouldn't say fake, but if you're talking about specifically negative reviews, which sometimes also might be fake, whenever something such things happen, the patients use online platform as a means to vent. And whenever you're venting, you, I don't know, you are just using a very strong language, as we saw in that example, which called a practice a fraud or a scum. So most often than not, this is honestly not the true reflection of any practice. But as we've discussed before, also once your review is out there, you have to deal with it. Positive, negative, fake, true. There is literally no other way to deal, or no other way to go about it than actually dealing with it. So first, acknowledge it. Then I think a good approach would be to also reflect your side of the story, but without indulging too much details, so that any average user, who's going through this review can be exposed to both the aspects and is not really partial to one side of the story while taking a decision if you are the right doctor for them or not. Then contact the patient offline and try to find out if genuinely if anything is wrong. If not, as I said, then let's suggest, let's think about taking the legal action. We sincerely hope it does not come to that. So I think summarizing it, putting your story out there without indulging too much details, and then checking in with the patient offline will really help.
Thanks, Shivangi, for beautifully wording it out on how to really address the fake reviews. Because when you get positive reviews and when you get them, when you get a lot of positive reviews, people think that those are fake. But when you actually get fake reviews, it becomes very difficult to really have a professional response to that, and always and accordingly be strong that these are fake reviews. So thanks for beautifully explaining.
I think also
that.
adding to that, in one part of the session, we also covered that if you are receiving all 5-star reviews, all raving reviews, I mean, the first thought that goes into the person's head is that this is too good to be true. So, and in fact, an ideal rating is never a 5 rating. It's actually just between 4.1 to 4.3. Anything above that seems too good to be true, seems too good to be true. So yeah, I mean, that's how the patient's mind, or in fact the ideal user's mind, also works. But again, good, bad, whatever it is, as I said, the first step is acknowledging and at least showing your presence, that you hear everybody, good, bad, whatever.
Sure.
Okay, so
Thank you.
you're welcome. So should I ask the next couple of questions?
Sure, please shoot away.
Okay, because I've been receiving some from the team as well. So this one is actually a little bit sensitive. One of our doctors asks that sometimes doctors deliver a very good service, but there's usually some issue on the payment side later on. And because of that, sometimes the doctors end up getting a negative review. So similar to what example we saw in one of the reviews for a dermatologist of the spaceship office and everything. I don't think there's any issue with the service, but after they had been treated or diagnosed or whatever, a review came in that this is very overpriced. So how do we deal with that?
Yeah, I think that's a very smart question. Now there are two things that we should normally take in cognizance while we are getting such responses from the patients. First, we have to be transparent. So whatever is your charge for consulting a patient, you should be transparent right from the get-go. So if it's possible for you, display that in your clinic on a physical piece of paper, so that they understand that this is your visiting charges and this is what the patient needs to pay up. Second thing is, there are many online sites where nowadays, because of COVID-19, teleconsultation is happening. So explain or mention again there, what are you going to charge if you are doing an online consultation, if they're booking through a particular teleconsultation site, but they're booking for a physical checkup, how the entire charge will differ. And if they are making charge, if they're booking their appointment through a third party resource, are they charged differently? So be transparent on all the different channels through which consultation can be booked, and all the different media through which you can provide the consultation. That's the first part. Now coming to the second part, this goes beyond OPD. This comes to IPD. So if you are looking into surgeries, now normally all the surgeries start only with giving a proposal. So a doctor or the hospital would have a package for the surgery that the patient is looking forward to. So if you don't have the time as a surgeon, have a staff who can dedicatedly walk through the entire package or plan to the patient and the payer or the family member who is going to make this decision, right? So explain them why you are charging what you are charging, and be transparent about that. Don't include later on in the entire receipt hidden costs. There should be no hidden costs, because that's a genuine review then if you're having hidden costs. So talk about the entire package of plans, dedicate a staff for that. It will do only good to you, and the patient will also be very happy with the service, because you have actually gone beyond just treating them to also making them confident that whatever is happening, whatever they are charging, they're charging for a reason. So that is how you should be dealing. Once you get a response, even after doing so much, in terms of explaining them the payment cycle and the payment terms, even then, if you get a negative review, I think the case study beautifully explained how you basically tell them that everything cannot be compared to some other clinic, because the service that you provide is of a certain level, and the doctor is actually wanting only exceptional service to be delivered to the patient. So, and that's why the premiumness is attached to it. So be honest about it, and that's how you deal with it. Don't go and say that apologies, I will give you a better discount next time. That's not the way. You have charged for a reason. So if you're premium, you're premium. If you value for money, you're value for money. So, and then you'll accordingly get the audience or the patient coming to your clinic. So stick to that, and maintain a transparent attitude to sharing the payment schedule for both OPD and IPD for your patients.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. I think most of the problems occur in case of OPD consultations, because whenever a person is going through a very detailed treatment, I am assuming that most of these things are being clarified from the very beginning, and that is when they opt to go for that treatment. Especially in cases of OPDs, there's always usually also a very stark comparison that we visited that doctor and they did not charge us that much, and why are we giving extra for you and things like that. So I agree with the point that once it's, especially given the teleconsultation era, if it's mentioned clearly, the patient can first make a good decision basis. If price point is their only factor, then I think go through that and then accordingly choose a doctor that suits their budget as well. Thank you, Priyanka. I think the last question for the day would be, how do you respond to a dissatisfied patient for factors which are beyond your control? And the case in point being that when an appointment booking happens in shared practices.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's a good question. I would say thank you, Shivangi, for that. So when we were talking about addressing the negative reviews, I mentioned that you or your staff could do everything that you could imagine for a patient, but still then the patient could be dissatisfied for factors beyond your control. So maybe they had to wait a long time for your consultation, or they faced a long waiting time in getting the consultation also. These are beyond your control. If you have a patient line, you have a patient line. But if there is a situation where you arrived late for seeing your patients, then you have to call it out. So your staff needs, at the reception desk, needs to apologize for that the doctor was involved with such and such. And we are all human, believe us, we are not gods. Though doctors are considered to be gods, next to God's, but there could be an emergency case that could have come. You could have been stuck in a traffic. You could have a family emergency, and that's why you were late. So, sort of include them in why you were late, explain them why you were late in coming to the clinic, and that's why all your appointments got delayed. That would sort of give a very humane or personal touch to whatever experience the patient had. Let's suppose it was a technical error. So that's again beyond your control. You have a beautiful, patient appointment management system. Everything is going digital. All the hospitals are recording everything digitally. They are sharing SMSs, reminders to the patients that this on this in this date and on this in this time, doctor this and this will be seeing you. Suppose there was a technical glitch and all the messages that you sent for the day were, sort of messed up. So how do you deal with that? If, fortunately, somebody sort of picked it up that there was something faulty running down for the scheduling, correct that. Again, send a reminder message. Do that personally, or pick up the phone. Ask your staff to pick up the phone and call the patients individually and tell them that this and this has happened. Your appointment could be delayed, preponed, postponed. So do that. Or if unfortunately you were not able to really pick up that something, something went wrong, then whenever the patient arrives, do let them know immediately. So you should not be just sitting there in your reception desk and when the patient walks up to you, then you tell them right at the forefront that there was a technical problem that we faced, and we are trying to correct it from our end. But meanwhile, if you have some other work, because your schedule is or your appointment is now scheduled for maybe 2 hours later, you can finish up that, or if you wish, you can postpone the entire appointment or consultation to a next day, whichever is convenient for you. So we'd be happy to do that for you. So be very candid about that. There should be no wall between the staff and the patient. There's no a tussle of who should be asking or who should be telling first on such mistakes or on such uh, dissatisfaction related experiences. So I think that should help you.
Yeah, I think also if there are certain genuine problems of so many reschedulings or miscommunication. So I think ideally a practice should also take these into their purview and make sure that even they are doing or putting in the efforts to make sure that events like these don't happen. Of
Yeah.
course, when there's an emergency with your doctor and then you then have to reschedule, then it makes sense. But sometimes I think, talking from our personal experiences also, when we walk up at the reception, they suggest, that this doctor is not available. Would you be up for, getting a consultation from the other doctor? Same qualification and everything. But I think it's always a very strong trust factor that if I am referring to a certain physician or a certain general physician at all times, I will not be very comfortable, switching just by that. So I think you're right. Adequate communication and adequate communication at the right time is very, very crucial for making sure that your patient experience is not ruined.
Yeah. In fact, sometimes you also see that mostly the calendar is booked for any doctor in terms of giving consultation to the patient. So if you have to really, if the patient is really then asking you to postpone it to another day and you see the calendar is already booked, how do you tackle such situation? What you can do is, and I've seen this happen in cases, the doctors sort of start their practice a little early. So you call the patients a little early, even before your calendarized schedule begins, so that you sort of, and you make the patient know, you reinforce, you assert that because you should not be facing any inconvenience, the doctor is willing to take out more time so that he or she can see you, because this goes a long way in sort of also sharing a positive image of the doctor. And more often than not, the patient would be then considering all these factors while submitting their reviews. So
No, absolutely. I think that makes sense. And also, I think the question was Also, sometimes from a perspective of, let's say, if the doctor is listed on a teleconsultation application, and if that suggests, sometimes a lot of times, in fact, it happens that their system and your practice system are not in sync. This has been my personal experience that I have tried to book an appointment from a certain application where it shows that that window is available for me, but there's some error, I don't know what, and then I call up the clinic and they say that the doctor is not available for 2 days. So a lot of times, because these logistical level issues are there, it ruins the patient experience, which honestly the healthcare professional is not responsible for or is not at fault with. So, but still, I mean, it's still being sort of going to be eventually tied up to an experience from their practice or an experience from visiting them. So I think that also is very important. As much as the functional part of it is, needed, the practices also need to ensure, the staff needs to ensure that their scheduling system is aligned with, if they're using any third parties to book appointments.
Yeah, absolutely right, Shivangi.
Okay.
I think was that the last question that we had?
Yes. I think we are. Our time only allowed for us to take these many questions. If there are any other questions from any of the attendees, please do feel free to send it in our chat box below, and we will try our best to get in touch with you with your answers. On that note, I would like to thank Priyanka for being such a sport and doing this session with us today. And also a big thank you to all of the attendees who took out the time from their busy schedule and attended this session. We are sincerely hopeful that you could take up some key points from this session that you could further implement to your practice and establish a very clear, transparent, and a very efficient review management system. Our team at Docplexus is always happy to empower doctors. And when I say empowering, it doesn't mean on the scientific front, but across all aspects. We did this session aiming just at that. Thanks once again for being such a wonderful and patient audience. We'll see you in our next session. Till then, happy Docplexing.
Bye-bye. Take care. Thanks, Shivangi.